Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is voiding tickets and correcting tickets that were referred back to you by a prosecutor. So voids used to be very simple in Sector. There was a push a button, put a reason. And it still is pretty simple to do, but there are a few changes that were made specifically because of the voids. So very briefly, I'm going to explain the difference between a void and a cancellation. So if I write a ticket and I get about halfway through it in the paper world and I realize I don't need to write this ticket, or I shouldn't be writing this ticket, or whatever, I would need to void it. And to void the paper ticket, I would basically put an X through it, write void on it, do a voided ticket report, whatever your agency policy is. With the problem that was happening was once you hand that ticket to an offender, even if you just hand it and you take it back, you can't do that. There's actually RCW that says if a peace officer issues a court document, or a citation essentially, and takes it back through a void, it's a misdemeanor. So we don't want to do that. And Sector has actually built in some safeguards to prevent you from doing that. Now, the way to get around that, both in the paper world and in Sector, is a cancellation. If I issue a ticket, and let's say 2 days later, for whatever reason, I realize I shouldn't have, or I don't need to, I would do a cancellation. Again, you're going to have to check with your agency on that. That could be a memo up to your prosecuting attorney. That could be some sort of report your agency has. Whatever it is, that's the difference between a cancellation and a void. Before a ticket's been handed over, you can give a void. After a ticket's been handed over, you have to do a cancellation. So, going back to this, you'll see on my screen I've been sent 2 tickets back by the prosecutor's office here. If you are in an agency that actually has a prosecutor using electronic Sector, this is one of the biggest advantages of that. Essentially, if in the paper world, even with Sector, if my prosecutor is not linked in, these are DWLS third tickets and I think a transfer title ticket, I would have to still print that out, hand sign it, and send it to the prosecutor's office. However, in this case, with the prosecutor actually using Sector, I can do it via the send receive process, just like a collision report between me and my sergeant. So it's actually very handy and completely electronic. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. You'll notice, once it decides to load, you'll notice that this ticket is open. So it allows me to make changes as necessary. It's only open for me. So when the prosecutor got this ticket, just so you know, they can't edit anything. That's mainly why they're sending it back. Now, this was kind of an early annoyance for some agencies because apparently, there could be a minor error where you might have been able to white it out before. At the end of the day, you signed this document under penalty of perjury. Somebody else probably shouldn't be editing it, right? So it's definitely a good safeguard built into Sector that you and only you can edit your document here. In this case, you'll see this comment box down here. There's a little envelope next to it. That envelope is not normally there. This allows me to have comments passed between me and the prosecutor. So just like the sergeant review process, when they reject something back and there's comments on it, this is how the prosecutor will tell you either what they need to go forward with this or any problems with it, so on and so forth. So in this case, the prosecutor tells me no narrative. So I write my narrative. That's the only change I needed to make. I will go all the way through the end of my ticket. Now, much like before, I've passed this screen, which we've talked about. That's the final review screen. The ticket's locked down again. So don't pass the final review screen until you're actually ready to pass it. Okay, so I will pass this screen, press finished here, and you'll notice that the status changes it back to pending prosecuting attorney. I would do a send receive. It goes back to the prosecutor. If they like it, they will file it. If they need to send it back to you again, so on and so forth. These do not automatically come back to you. Just like collision reports, you have to do a send receive to get them. If you have a prosecutor that is using Sector, I would arrange that with them. Other than that, that is the process of resubmitting tickets that needed corrections to your prosecutor. So let's open up this one now. And on this one, when it decides to open, what we're going to do now is we're going to show you a void. So this ticket, we're just going to go ahead and say we're voiding this one out. So we're going to press void. Asks if you want to continue, yes. So this is a new feature of Sector 3.0 with voids. What it's asking you here, and here's the RCW that I was talking about earlier, is have you already served this on the person? Because, and I'm going to show you this in a second, if I press yes here, it's not going to let me void it. It's actually going to prevent me from voiding it at all, or even changing it. The ticket's been issued, you have to do it a different way. I'm going to press no for now. So I'm going to say I have not issued this ticket to the person. Now, it comes to this screen. You have three options here. You can just void it out. You can change it or no change it. Now, no changing it is basically, you might as well press cancel here. But change it allows me to go in and change the ticket even after it's been locked down. So before, once we passed that final review screen, we were done. We were locked, and we had to actually void out the ticket and start over if there were corrections that needed to be made. Now you can get around that with this change button. The change button will allow me to go in. Obviously, you have to put a reason why. So let's say you mess up the license plate, and before you didn't check it on the final review screen, but as you're walking back to the car, you look down at the ticket and you realize, oops, I made a mistake. This is where you would be able to basically shred or dispose of that copy of the ticket, go back to your car before you hand it to the offender, and do this change process to make your correction. So I'll press finish to show you what this looks like. So see, I can actually still edit it. So now this is the void process. Now this looks exactly like the voids before. Basically, it's the same thing. Just arbitrary reason there. So when I press finish here, again, it voids the ticket out just like we did before. Send receive. And we will send this stuff off. So that is the process of voiding now versus the process of correcting a prosecutor ticket. Just be aware, the prosecuting tree only works if you have an agency where your prosecutor is using Sector. Off the top of my head, for example, I can think of Burien, SeaTac, Newcastle. Those are prosecuting attorneys' offices that use Sector, and those agencies are allowed to do electronic routing with the prosecutor. Everybody else, if your prosecutor is not using this, you still have to print it out and send it.